The sun was already high when I realized something was wrong. Ethan had promised he'd be back before breakfast. He left early, saying he needed to meet a business partner nearby. I didn't think much of it. He was always busy, always talking about deals and meetings. Even on vacation, my son could never fully disconnect from his phone or his work. But I was just happy to be there, thousands of miles away from the cold emptiness of my house in Ohio. We were in Portugal, on the southern coast, a town called Lagos. It was beautiful, bright pastel houses, cobblestone streets that wound toward the sea, and the smell of salt in the air. For the first 2 days, I felt alive again. I laughed when Ethan convinced me to try grilled sardines and local wine, and I took photos I didn't even know how to store properly on my phone. He'd said this trip was his way of helping me heal after my wife, Margaret, passed. She had always dreamed of seeing the ocean, and when she died, I couldn't even bring myself to visit the lake near our home. The silence hurt too much. So when Ethan surprised me with the tickets, I cried. I thought, he understands me after all. But now, on the 4th morning, his suitcase was gone. The bed hadn't been slept in. His phone went straight to voicemail. I walked down to the front desk, my hands trembling slightly. "Excuse me," I said to the young woman at reception. "Has my son checked out?" She looked at the computer screen for a moment, then frowned. "Yes, sir. Mr. Johnson checked out yesterday morning." My chest tightened. "What? That must be a mistake. He told me he was coming right back." She hesitated, sensing the panic in my voice. "Maybe he'll return, sir." "But—" She looked at the monitor again. "The room payment for tonight hasn't been made. The card he used, it was declined." I stared at her, not understanding. Declined? Ethan had a successful business, a big house, 2 cars. Money was never an issue. I pulled out the wallet he'd handed me the day we arrived. It only had a few euros and a credit card with my name on it. When I tried to pay for another night, the manager shook his head. "I'm sorry, sir, but this card doesn't go through either." That's when I felt it. The kind of cold that seeps into your bones, not from weather, but from realization. I spent that night sitting on a wooden bench outside the hotel, watching strangers come and go. The streets buzzed with life, families laughing, couples walking hand in hand. I sat there until my back ached and my eyes burned. I must have fallen asleep for a while because when I opened them, it was dawn and the street cleaners were spraying water on the cobblestones. I walked to the police station with my small suitcase, hoping someone could help. The officer listened, polite but distant, writing notes in a small pad. "Do you have any way to contact your son, Mr. Johnson?" he asked. "His phone is off," I whispered. "He's all I have." The man sighed, eyes softening. "Maybe it's a misunderstanding. Try the embassy, perhaps. They can help." But even at the American embassy, all I received were sympathetic looks and printed pamphlets. "We can't locate your son, sir," they said. "But you still have your passport. That's good. Do you have funds to stay for now?" Funds. I wanted to laugh. I had about 40 euros left and an old wristwatch Margaret gave me on our 30th anniversary. That was all. That evening, I sat by the harbor, staring at the horizon. The sea looked endless, merciless. I thought of Margaret, how she used to say the ocean was a symbol of eternity. Now it felt more like exile. Days blurred together. I started selling small trinkets near the tourist square just to eat. A keychain here, an old book there. A kind shopkeeper named Ines let me sleep in her storage room sometimes. She didn't speak much English, but her kindness was enough to keep me going. Every night, I told myself, he'll call. There must be an explanation. But deep down, a darker thought began to grow. Ethan had always been ambitious. Ruthless, even. When his company was struggling last year, I loaned him part of my retirement savings, $60,000. He promised to pay me back. He never did. Margaret warned me that he was changing, that he saw people only as tools. I refused to believe her. Now, sitting in that foreign city, I began to understand what she meant. I wasn't stranded by accident. I was disposed of. Maybe I was an embarrassment. Maybe a burden. Maybe he wanted whatever money or house I had left. I didn't know the reason yet, but I knew one thing. If I ever made it back home, I would find out why. That night, under the whispering palms and the faint hum of the sea, I made a silent promise to my wife and to myself. If Ethan thought I'd vanished quietly, forgotten in some foreign alleyway, he was wrong. He had taken everything from me, my pride, my trust, my peace. But he forgot one thing. A father's heart doesn't die so easily. And someday, when he least expected it, he would see me again. And when he did, he wouldn't believe his eyes. The first month was the hardest. I had no home, no family, no way to call the United States. My phone had died weeks earlier, and I didn't even have the right charger. My English meant little here. Most people spoke Portuguese or a broken mix of languages I could barely follow. I, a man who once ran a small hardware store in Cleveland, now wandered cobblestone streets like a ghost, surviving on kindness and scraps. At first, I stayed near the harbor. Tourists passed by every day, clicking photos, eating ice cream, complaining about heat. I watched them from a distance, remembering the excitement I felt when Ethan brought me here. I remembered him laughing, calling me old man when I couldn't figure out the currency. It had felt playful then, but maybe that was just another lie. I started working odd jobs, sweeping in front of a cafe, carrying boxes for a fisherman, washing dishes in a tiny restaurant by the docks. The pay was barely enough to eat, but it gave me something I'd almost lost: dignity. One day, I met Ines again, the woman who'd first helped me. She was in her 50s, short, with kind eyes and hair always tied back with a scarf. She ran a souvenir shop near the marina. When she saw me struggling to lift a crate, she frowned. "Senor Frank," she said in her broken English, "you work too much. Come, coffee." I followed her inside. The smell of roasted beans filled the air, and I felt a warmth I hadn't felt in months. "Your son call?" she asked gently. I shook my head. "No, I think he won't." She studied me for a moment, then placed her hand over mine. "Then you make new life. Here, new start. New life." Those words stuck in my head all night. For weeks, I lived in the back of her shop, sleeping on a cot between stacks of boxes filled with seashell magnets and postcards. I worked every day, fixing shelves, cleaning, greeting tourists. Slowly, I began to understand a few Portuguese words. Some of the locals started to recognize me. One morning, while sweeping outside, a man with a camera stopped and asked, "American?" I nodded. He smiled. "You help me? I need photo assistant. Pay good." His name was Marco, a travel photographer. He hired me to carry his gear and help talk to tourists. I didn't know anything about photography, but Marco was patient. He told me stories of the world: Morocco, Greece, Iceland. He had a way of describing places that made me forget I was broken. I began to write in a small notebook every night, letters to Margaret. I told her about the sunsets, the laughter of children playing on the pier, the seagulls that stole bread right out of my hands. I wrote as if she were still beside me. Maybe, in some way, she was. But even as life started to form a fragile rhythm, something inside me refused to rest. One afternoon, Marco asked casually, "So, your family in America? You visit soon?" I froze. "My son," I said after a moment. "He left me here." He blinked. "Left you? You mean he returned early?" I forced a bitter smile. "No, he abandoned me." Marco didn't ask again, but the next day, he brought me a small envelope. Inside was €50 and a note: "For when you go home. Everyone deserves to go home." That night, I sat outside, holding the money and staring at the stars. I wanted to believe I could just move on, rebuild, forget. But the truth was I couldn't. Every act of kindness reminded me how cruel Ethan had been. Weeks later, I finally went to an internet cafe. I hadn't checked anything online since arriving. The screen glowed as I typed his name: Ethan Johnson, Cleveland, Ohio. The first thing that came up was an article: "Local entrepreneur expands real estate business after father's tragic passing abroad." My blood ran cold. Passing. He had told people I was dead. He had used my disappearance, my suffering, to erase me completely. And worse, to gain sympathy. The article mentioned how his father's untimely death inspired him to focus on building homes for families. There was even a photo of him shaking hands with investors, smiling proudly. I stared at the screen until my vision blurred. My fingers shook as I scrolled, reading line after line of lies. He had taken over everything: my home, my accounts, even the business I had built before retiring. I wasn't just abandoned. I was erased. For the first time in months, I didn't feel weak or scared. I felt something else. Cold. Focused. Alive. I closed the computer slowly. "All right, Ethan," I whispered. "You took everything from me, but you forgot one thing. I'm still here." The next morning, I bought a small map and circled the nearest American embassy in Lisbon. It would take me weeks to get there on foot, but I didn't care. I was going home, not as the broken man you left behind, but as the ghost you never expected to see again. The road to Lisbon felt endless. I traveled mostly on foot, sometimes hitchhiking with kind strangers who didn't ask too many questions. I carried only a small backpack with a change of clothes, my passport, and Margaret's photograph. Every night, I unfolded it, whispered her name, and promised her I would come home, not to rest, but to reclaim what was stolen. When I finally reached Lisbon, I was exhausted, half-starved, and thinner than I'd ever been. My beard had grown wild, my hands cracked from work and sun, but inside, something unbreakable had formed, a quiet flame that no betrayal could extinguish. The embassy officer looked at me with disbelief when I explained what had happened. "Mr. Johnson, you mean your son declared you deceased?" "Yes," I said, "and I intend to prove him wrong." They helped me file reports, verify my identity, and begin the process of contacting the authorities back home. It took weeks. Bureaucracy moves slower than grief, and I had plenty of both. Eventually, I managed to secure a one-way flight back to the United States. Marco, my photographer friend, showed up at the airport unexpectedly that morning with a brown paper bag. "Lunch," he said with a grin. "And luck." He hugged me tightly before I boarded. I didn't cry. I thought I'd run out of tears, but my heart felt heavy with gratitude. There were still good people in the world, even if my own son wasn't one of them. The plane touched down in Cleveland on a cold, gray afternoon. The moment I stepped outside, the air bit into my skin, sharp and familiar. I'd imagined this return 100 times in my head, but nothing prepared me for the quiet ache that followed. I took a cab straight to my old neighborhood. When the taxi turned onto Maplewood Drive, my hands began to tremble. My house stood at the end of the street, painted white now instead of blue, the porch railings freshly replaced. Ethan's new cars gleamed in the driveway. It didn't look like my home anymore. It looked like something staged for a magazine. The driver asked, "You want me to wait?" "No," I said. "I won't be long." I walked up the familiar path. The wind carried the faint scent of pine from the backyard where Margaret's garden once bloomed. I could almost hear her laughter. I stopped at the porch, staring at the welcome mat that read "Family First." My throat tightened. Then the door opened. Ethan stood there. For a moment, he just stared, his mouth slightly open, color draining from his face. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. "Dad?" His voice cracked. "That's not, you can't be." I didn't say a word. I stepped forward, the wooden floor creaking beneath me. I could see my reflection in the hallway mirror. Older, thinner, eyes harder than I remembered. "You left me there," I said quietly. My voice wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of every sleepless night, every hunger pang, every betrayal. "You left me to die." He swallowed hard, trying to compose himself. "It wasn't like that, Dad," I thought. "Don't lie." His wife, Lena, appeared behind him, clutching a cup of coffee. When she saw me, she gasped and nearly dropped it. "Frank." "Oh my God, Ethan, you said." "I know what I said," he snapped, glaring at her. Then, turning back to me, "You don't understand. Things were complicated. You were old, confused." "Confused?" I laughed bitterly. "I might be old, but I'm not blind. You declared me dead so you could take everything. My savings, my store, the house your mother loved." He looked down, guilt flickering across his face for a brief moment before pride returned to mask it. "You wouldn't have understood, Dad. The business was failing. I had to make decisions. Hard ones. Hard ones." I stepped closer, my voice low. "You call abandoning your father on the other side of the world a decision?" Lena backed away slowly, whispering, "Ethan, what did you do?" I could see it in her eyes, the realization, the disgust. She hadn't known. He hadn't told her the full story. Maybe he'd said I'd died of a heart attack abroad. Maybe he'd told her I was sick. Whatever it was, the truth was unraveling right before his eyes. Ethan's mask started to crack. "Dad, please. I can fix this. I can explain everything. Just give me a chance." I looked around the living room. My wife's piano was gone. The family portraits replaced with modern art. Even the old clock on the wall gone. Everything that made this house ours had been erased. Just like me. "No, Ethan," I said finally. "You had your chance." He stepped closer, desperation rising in his voice. "Dad, don't do this. If you go to the police." I cut him off with a raised hand. I'm not going to the police. He frowned, confused. Then what are you? I'm going to live, I said simply. Right here, in this town. So every morning when you wake up, you'll remember what you did. Every face you see, every whisper you hear, will remind you that your father is still here. Watching, breathing, living the life you tried to bury. Ethan stood frozen, eyes wide. I turned and walked down the steps, the cold air burning my lungs. But for the first time since Margaret died, I felt alive. Behind me, his voice broke the silence. Dad, please, don't hate me. I stopped, not turning around. I don't hate you, son, I said softly. But I don't love who you became. And with that, I walked away, leaving him standing in the doorway of a house built on lies. He thought I'd come back from the dead. He didn't realize I'd never really died. The next morning, I woke in a cheap motel on the edge of town. I hadn't slept much. My body was back home, but my mind was still lost somewhere on that Portuguese coastline. Every sound, cars passing, distant voices, felt strange, unreal. I'd imagined my return 100 times, but not like this. Not in silence. Not in exile from my own family. I sat on the bed, watching the gray light creep through the blinds. My hands shook slightly as I poured cheap instant coffee into a cracked mug. Across the room, my reflection stared back at me from the mirror, a face I barely recognized. Sunburnt skin, lines deeper than I remembered, eyes darker, colder. But there was something new behind them. Purpose. Ethan wanted to move on. To pretend his dead father was nothing more than a sad story to impress investors. He wanted to bury me in memory, just as he had in paperwork. But I wasn't gone. Not yet. I spent the first few days walking around town quietly. My house was just a few blocks away from the old hardware store I'd run for 30 years. When I saw it again, my throat tightened. It had been renamed Johnson and Partners. My name still hung above the door, but smaller now, just a relic. Ethan's name dominated the sign, bold and clean. I watched from across the street as customers came and went. The young clerk behind the counter didn't even recognize me. My own store, filled with strangers. But the past has a way of leaving traces. One afternoon, I saw Martha, my old accountant, stepping out of the store. She froze when she saw me. Her eyes widened, hand flying to her mouth. Frank, dear God, they said you were dead. I said quietly. At least, on paper. Tears filled her eyes as she pulled me into a trembling hug. He told everyone you'd suffered a heart attack overseas. We even had a memorial, Frank. He said he scattered your ashes by the lake. I felt something twist inside me, a mix of sorrow and disgust. He used your name to access my accounts, didn't he? Martha hesitated. Frank, I didn't know. I swear I didn't. The documents had signatures, looked like yours. My stomach turned cold. Ethan had forged my name. He hadn't just lied. He'd stolen everything I'd built. My store, my savings, even my memory. I squeezed her hand. You did nothing wrong, Martha. But I need your help now. That night, she brought me copies of every document. Bank transfers, real estate deeds, business paperwork. Everything Ethan had used to take control. I spent hours reading them, the words blurring into one long betrayal. But then, somewhere near the bottom of a folder, I saw something that stopped my heart. A name. Heritage Foundation Grant. Johnson Family Real Estate. $250,000 award for community housing project. It wasn't the grant that caught my eye. It was the note below it, signed by Ethan Johnson and Frank Johnson, deceased. He was still using my name. Even in death, I was his tool. That's when I knew how I'd get my revenge. Not by shouting, not by fighting, but by letting the truth speak in the one place he couldn't silence it, public record. The next morning, I visited the local newspaper office. It was small, run by an old journalist named Harold Whitmore. I'd met him years ago when he wrote about small-town businesses. When I walked in, he squinted at me like he was seeing a ghost. Frank Johnson? I went to your funeral. I managed a dry smile. Then I guess you can write the sequel. I showed him everything. The forged documents, the fake death certificate, the grant papers. At first, he didn't believe it. Then, as he read line after line, his hands began to shake. Jesus, Frank, this is fraud. Embezzlement. Identity theft. I don't want his money, I said quietly. I just want people to know what he did. Harold leaned back, rubbing his chin. You sure about this? Once it's out there, it won't just destroy his business, it'll destroy him. I met his eyes. He destroyed me first. It took 3 days for the article to hit. The headline was simple. Local businessman declared father dead to claim grant money. Investigation underway. The reaction was immediate. Within hours, the news spread through town like wildfire. Social media lit up. Neighbors whispered. Investors pulled out. And for the first time since I'd returned, Ethan called me. The phone rang at dawn. I answered. Yes. His voice trembled. Dad, what did you do? I told the truth. You're ruining me, he shouted. You have no idea what this will do to my company. I had no idea what it would do to me when you left me to die. I interrupted coldly. Now we're even. There was silence. I could hear him breathing heavily, on the verge of breaking. Dad, please, he whispered finally. You can't understand. I had pressure, debts. I understand perfectly, I said. You chose yourself. And now, you'll live with that choice. I hung up before he could answer. That day, I walked to the lake, the same one where he'd told everyone he'd scattered my ashes. The water shimmered under the autumn sun. For the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. I sat on the bench, closed my eyes, and whispered to Margaret, it's over. But in truth, it wasn't. Because revenge, I'd learned, isn't a single act. It's a slow, quiet echo that keeps returning, until the guilty finally hear it in their own hearts. And Ethan, he was only beginning to hear mine. The town buzzed with whispers the next morning. Everywhere I went, cafes, gas stations, grocery stores, people stared, some in shock, others in quiet pity. Everyone had read the article. Everyone knew the truth now. By noon, Johnson & Partners had closed its doors. The bold sign that once bore Ethan's name hung crooked, one side torn loose by the wind. His partners had withdrawn, his investors fled, and by evening, the building was surrounded by news vans. It was surreal to watch it happen. I didn't feel triumphant. Not really. Just still. For months, I had imagined what I'd say if I ever saw him broken. If I ever saw the arrogant man who left me to die brought down by his own lies. I thought I'd feel justice. Closure. But now that it was happening, I felt only the weight of years lost. That night, I sat in the diner near the edge of town, the one Margaret and I used to visit every Sunday after church. The same vinyl booths, same faded wallpaper. The waitress, Laura, a sweet woman in her 40s, brought me coffee without asking. Hard week? She said gently. I nodded. Something like that. She hesitated, then leaned closer. I saw the paper, Frank. You did the right thing. People need to know what kind of man your son became. Her words were kind, but they didn't comfort me. I stirred my coffee, watching the cream swirl like smoke. Maybe, I murmured. But sometimes, doing the right thing doesn't feel right at all. Outside, rain began to fall, thin, steady, cleansing. By the next morning, Ethan's story had spread far beyond Cleveland. A national outlet picked it up. Businessman declared father dead for profit. Investigation expands. He couldn't hide anymore. A week later, I saw him for the first time since that phone call. He was standing in the courthouse parking lot, waiting for his hearing. His suit was wrinkled, his eyes hollow. The confident smile that once defined him was gone. When he noticed me walking toward him, he froze. Dad, he said, his voice raw. I stopped a few feet away. Ethan. For a moment, we just stood there, rain falling between us. I lost everything, he said, staring at the ground. They froze my accounts, seized the business. Lena left with our son. I have nothing. You had me once, I said quietly. And your mother. You had love, family, honesty. But that wasn't enough for you. He swallowed hard, eyes filling with tears. I don't know why I did it. I thought I could fix things. I told myself it was just business. But when I saw your name in that article, he shook his head, trembling. I realized how much I'd become someone you'd hate. I wanted to tell him he was right. I wanted to turn away. But when I looked into his face, pale, desperate, I didn't see the greedy man who left me behind. I saw my little boy again. The one who used to run barefoot in the yard, laughing, chasing fireflies while Margaret clapped from the porch. I sighed, the anger inside me softening like ice in the sun. You became lost, Ethan. But hate won't bring either of us back. He blinked, startled. You forgive me? I looked past him, toward the courthouse steps. No, I said honestly. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I don't need revenge anymore. The truth already did that for me. He wiped his eyes, nodding slowly. I don't deserve your kindness. I'm not giving you kindness, I said. I'm giving you a chance to be better, something you never gave me. As I turned to leave, he called out, his voice breaking. Dad, where will you go? Home, I said softly. To what's left of it. That evening, I returned to the lake one more time. The air was cool, heavy with the scent of wet pine. The surface shimmered with the fading reflection of the sunset, soft orange bleeding into deep blue. I sat on the same bench where Ethan had once scattered my ashes, as the story went. I closed my eyes and smiled faintly. We did it, Margaret, I whispered. He knows the truth now. A gentle wind brushed across my face, rustling the leaves. It almost felt like her hand, resting on my shoulder. In the following weeks, the world moved on. News headlines changed. People found new scandals to whisper about. Ethan's name disappeared from the papers, replaced by others. He moved out of town quietly, taking whatever pieces of his life he could still hold together. I stayed. Rebuilt the small store with my own hands, just like I'd done 40 years ago. Some neighbors helped. Others offered quiet apologies for believing his lies. I didn't blame them. We all believe what we want to, until truth forces us to see differently. One morning, while I was fixing the old sign above the door, I found something in the mail, an envelope with no return address. Inside was a photo of a small coastal town, Portugal, the same street where I'd once slept, lost and alone. On the back, a short note. Thank you for giving me a chance to start again. I stared at it for a long time, then tucked it into my wallet beside Margaret's picture. I didn't know where life would take me next. Maybe I'd visit that town again someday, stand by the ocean and forgive the ghosts that lived there. But for now, I had something far better than revenge. I had peace. And sometimes, that's the quietest, strongest revenge of all. Weeks passed after Ethan's fall. The noise faded, headlines changed, and people slowly forgot the scandal that had shaken the town. But I couldn't forget. Every morning I woke before sunrise, sat by the window of my small rented house, and watched the first light touch the trees. Silence was supposed to be peaceful, yet it felt heavy. I had my justice. My name was cleared. The town pitied me, even respected me again. But at night, when I lay awake, I wondered if that was all I wanted. Had I lived this long just to prove a point? Sometimes, the mind plays tricks on you. I'd find myself imagining Ethan as a boy again, sitting at the kitchen table with peanut butter on his fingers, laughing with his mother. Margaret would roll her eyes, pretending to be annoyed, and I'd promise to scold him later, but never did. That was our family once. Before money, before greed. One morning, I went back to the store. The building still stood, half empty and quiet. Dust hung in the air like old memories. I ran my hand along the counter I'd built decades ago, every scratch a story. I could almost hear the bell above the door ring and Margaret's voice call from the back. Frank, coffee's ready. I closed my eyes and smiled sadly. That's when I heard footsteps behind me. Didn't think you'd come back here, said a familiar voice. I turned. It was Lena, Ethan's wife. She looked tired, her eyes red from crying, a child's small hand gripping hers. My grandson, Noah. He was about 8, maybe 9 now. I wasn't sure I'd be welcome, I said quietly. She hesitated. You have every right to be here, Frank. This was your place. Noah stepped closer, staring at me curiously. Mom says you're Grandpa Frank. I knelt down slowly. That's me, I said softly. Do you remember me, Noah? He shook his head shyly. Only from pictures. Lena smiled faintly. Ethan told him stories, but never the truth. There was a pause. The air felt thick between us. I left him, she said finally. After everything came out, I couldn't stay. He's trying to get help. I don't know if he'll ever change, but I can't make my son watch him like that. I nodded slowly. You did what you had to. Lena took a deep breath. Noah wanted to meet you. He's been asking about his grandpa for weeks. The boy looked up at me, eyes wide and innocent, the same blue as Ethan's once were. I felt something break open in my chest. Would you like to see the workshop, kiddo? I asked, forcing a smile. It's a little dusty, but still special. He nodded eagerly. For the next hour, I showed him around. The old tools, the sawdust-covered shelves, the small carvings I used to make when business was slow. He listened quietly, eyes full of wonder. At one point, he picked up a small wooden boat I'd made years ago and whispered, Can I keep this? Of course, I said, but only if you promise me something. What? Promise you'll never forget where you come from. Not the house, not the name. The people. He nodded solemnly, holding the boat close. When they left, Lena hugged me gently. Thank you, Frank, for not letting hate win. I didn't answer. I just watched them walk away, her hand in his, disappearing down the quiet street. And for the first time since Margaret's death, I felt something stir inside me again, something close to hope. It was a Sunday morning in late October when I saw him again. The church bells rang softly in the distance, their echo drifting through the crisp air. The sky hung low and pale, the kind of gray that seemed to hold back tears. I had gone to the cemetery, as I often did, to visit Margaret's grave. I brought fresh lilies, her favorite. The grass was damp, and a thin fog lingered between the rows of tombstones. I knelt by her headstone, tracing her name with my fingers. I think you'd be proud of me, love, I whispered. I didn't let him bury me. I came back. I paused, the wind moving gently through the trees. But it's strange. Winning doesn't feel like winning. You'd tell me that, wouldn't you? That revenge never fills the empty chair. Then I heard footsteps. Slow, uneven. I turned and froze. Ethan stood a few yards away. His hair was longer now, unkempt. His suit was worn, and his eyes, they were hollow, red-rimmed. The eyes of a man who hadn't slept or eaten properly in days. He stopped several feet from me, as if unsure whether to come closer. I thought, I might find you here, he said quietly. I stayed kneeling, silent. He looked down at the flowers in my hand. Mom used to love lilies. Yes, I said. She did. He took a shaky breath. I wanted to come sooner, but I didn't think you'd want to see me. You thought right. He nodded, accepting the blow without argument. I can't fix what I did, Dad, but I'm trying. I'm in a recovery program. For more than one thing. He gave a bitter laugh. For greed. For pride. For whatever it is that makes a man forget where he came from. I stood slowly, the earth cold under my shoes. Why now, Ethan? Why here? Because, he said, voice breaking. I didn't know where else to go. I lost everything. The company, the house, even Lena and Noah. And when I hit bottom, I realized all I ever wanted was what I already had. You, Mom, a family. He looked at me then, really looked at me. And for a moment, I saw that boy again. The one who used to bring me nails when I built his first treehouse. The one who used to say, when I grow up, I'll take care of you, Dad. But that promise had died a long time ago. I can't change what's done, I said finally. You left me to die, Ethan. You killed my name, my peace, and the last years of my life I could have spent quietly. I know. His voice cracked. I've replayed it every night since. The way you looked at me that last time, like I was a stranger. I wish I could take it back. Wishes don't bring people back, I murmured. He lowered his gaze. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just wanted to tell you. I'm sorry. For a long moment, there was only the sound of the wind moving through the leaves. I looked at my son, the man who had once been everything to me, and realized something I hadn't before. He wasn't the monster I'd painted in my anger. He was just broken, and in some cruel way, so was I. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a small folded photograph, the last one we'd taken as a family before Margaret passed. I handed it to him. Keep it, I said. Maybe it'll remind you who you were before all this. He took it carefully, as if it were made of glass. His lips trembled. Thank you. I'm not forgiving you, I said quietly. But I'm done hating you. That's all I can offer. Tears filled his eyes. That's more than I deserve. We stood there for a while in silence, two men bound by blood and regret, standing between the past and what little future remained. When he finally turned to leave, I said, Ethan. He stopped. Your son came to see me. He looked back, startled. Noah. I nodded. He's a good boy. Don't make him carry what you did. He swallowed hard, then whispered, I won't. And then he was gone, disappearing into the fog like a shadow dissolving with the morning. I stayed a while longer by Margaret's grave, my hands clasped together. You were right, love, I whispered. The only way to win is not to fight. For the first time in years, I felt her presence not as a memory, but as peace. Winter had begun to settle over the town. The mornings came heavy with frost, the kind that turned the windows milky and made the streets smell of smoke and pine. I had grown used to the quiet. My days were simple now, opening the old store, fixing whatever the locals brought in, and closing before dusk to drink tea by the window. Peace had become my closest companion. But peace, I was learning, never lasts forever. It was a Tuesday when the letter arrived. The envelope was thick, cream-colored, with my name written in careful, trembling handwriting. No return address. Just to Mr. Frank Johnson. I almost threw it away. These days, most of my mail was junk or bills, but something about the handwriting felt familiar. I opened it slowly. Inside was a folded note and a small photograph. The note read, "Dad, if you're reading this, it means I didn't have the courage to speak to you in person. I'm leaving town. The program helped me see things clearly for the first time in years. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want to start over somewhere new, where Noah might someday be proud of his father again. Thank you for not hating me when you had every reason to. Tell Mom I'm sorry when you visit her. I know she would have loved to see us whole again. Ethan." I sat there, staring at the paper, the words blurring as my eyes filled. Beneath the note was the photograph. Ethan standing near the old harbor in Portugal, the same one where he had abandoned me. He was holding a single flower, looking out at the water. My hands began to tremble. I didn't know how he'd gotten back there, or why, but something about the image struck me deeply. It was like a circle had closed. He had returned to the very place where he'd broken us. For a long time, I couldn't move. Finally, I stood, put on my coat, and walked outside. The cold bit into my cheeks, but I barely felt it. My feet carried me toward the lake, the one that had become my refuge. The water was still, dark, reflecting the thin slice of a winter moon. I took the letter from my pocket and read it again, slower this time. Every line carried pain, but also something else. A truth I hadn't expected. He was trying. For once, he wasn't lying, pretending, or running from his shame. He was owning it, and that mattered. I folded the note carefully and tucked it inside my jacket. Then I whispered into the cold air, "I hear you, son." For the first time since Margaret's death, I felt like my heart wasn't carrying a stone anymore. It still hurt, yes, but the hurt was cleaner now. It wasn't anger. It wasn't revenge. It was grief turning into something lighter. When I returned home, I placed the letter in the same box that held Margaret's things, her wedding ring, her recipes, a few old postcards. It didn't belong in the trash. It belonged with the truth of our family, beautiful, broken, but still ours. That night, I dreamed of the ocean. Not the angry, endless sea that had once frightened me, but a calm, gentle one. In the dream, I stood beside Ethan. We didn't speak. We just watched the waves roll in and out, like the rhythm of forgiveness. When I woke, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. Not at him. Not at life. Not even at the years I'd lost. Sometimes, peace doesn't come when you find justice. It comes when you stop needing it. The first snow of the season came quietly that year. It fell through the night in soft, steady sheets, blanketing the streets, rooftops, and trees until the town looked like it was holding its breath. I woke before dawn, stirred a pot of coffee, and watched the snow drift through the pale light. It was peaceful, too peaceful. The kind of silence that makes your skin tighten, because somewhere deep down, you know it's about to break. At 7:30, the phone rang. I rarely got calls anymore. For a moment, I thought it might be a wrong number. "Hello," I said. There was hesitation on the other end. Then a woman's voice, shaky, familiar. "Frank, it's Lena." My hand froze on the receiver. "Lena, is everything all right?" Her breath trembled. "It's Ethan." My heart sank. "What happened?" "He was in an accident. A bad one. He called me before it happened. He was driving back from the rehab center. He said he wanted to see you." Her voice broke. "He didn't make it far." The room went quiet. The sound of the wind outside seemed distant, hollow. I swallowed, trying to steady my voice. "Is he alive?" "Yes," she said quickly, but barely. "They're not sure he'll make it through the night. He's asking for you, Frank. He keeps saying your name." My first instinct was to refuse. I'd built my life around letting go, around finally finding peace. Going back to him now, it felt like reopening a wound that had just begun to heal. But then I heard her voice again, low, breaking. "Please, Frank. He needs to see you." I didn't think. I just grabbed my coat, my car keys, and left. The hospital was a 2-hour drive away, and the snowstorm had only worsened. The roads shimmered under the orange glow of streetlights, the world outside my windshield an endless blur of white and shadow. Every few miles, I thought about turning back, but I couldn't. Not this time. When I arrived, The nurse at the front desk recognized my name instantly. "He's been asking for you," she said softly, leading me down a quiet hallway that smelled of antiseptic and winter air. The room was dim. Machines beeped rhythmically beside the bed. And there he was. Ethan looked smaller somehow. The tubes, the pale skin, the bruises across his face. He didn't look like the man who once ran companies and smiled for cameras. He looked like a boy again. My boy. When his eyes opened and found mine, a weak smile tugged at the corners of his lips. "Dad, you came." I sat beside him slowly, my chest tight. "Of course I came." He tried to laugh, but it came out as a cough. "I didn't think you would." "I almost didn't," I admitted. "But your mother would have wanted me to." He nodded faintly. "I dream about her sometimes. She's always by the water, smiling. She's watching over you," I said softly. "Both of us." For a long moment, there was silence except for the faint hum of machines. Then he whispered, "Dad, I wanted to tell you something before it's too late." "Don't talk like that," I said quickly. "You'll be fine." He gave a small, tired smile. "You don't have to pretend. I know I won't." The words hit me like a hammer. He reached for my hand, his fingers trembling. "I was going to bring you a gift. Something I found in Portugal the last time I went there." I frowned. "Portugal?" He nodded weakly. "I went back to where I left you. I stood there for hours. I wanted to feel the shame, the fear you must have felt. I wanted it to burn into me so I'd never forget." His voice broke. "I'm so sorry, Dad. I tried to rebuild what I destroyed, but some things can't be rebuilt, can they?" I squeezed his hand. "Sometimes they can. Sometimes all it takes is trying." He closed his eyes, breathing shallowly. "I don't deserve it, but thank you for coming." I leaned forward, my voice low, steady. "Ethan, listen to me. You were lost, but you came back. That's what matters now." A single tear slipped from the corner of his eye. "Do you forgive me?" My throat tightened. "I already did, son. A long time ago." He smiled faintly. "Then I can rest." "Don't you dare," I said with a shaky laugh, gripping his hand tighter. "You're not done yet." But deep inside I knew. I felt the weight of finality in his voice, the calm that comes when a man has finally made peace with his ghosts. Moments later, the monitor's rhythm slowed. The nurse rushed in, her voice soft, urgent. I just sat there, holding his hand, whispering words I hadn't said in years. "It's all right, son. You can rest now." When the machine went silent, I didn't cry. I just closed my eyes and let the sound of the snow fill the world. That night, I stood outside the hospital, watching flakes fall against the dark sky. My breath came in clouds, my heart heavy but strangely still. For the first time since that day in Portugal, I felt something pure, something beyond revenge or sorrow. It was love, quiet, old, unbroken love. Spring came late that year. The snow melted slowly, feeding the rivers and filling the air with the scent of thawed earth and pine. For weeks after the funeral, the town seemed quieter than usual, as if even the wind had decided to speak softly out of respect. Ethan was buried beside his mother. I made sure of that. When the service ended and the last handful of soil hit the coffin, I stayed. Everyone else left. Lena, Noah, a few of Ethan's old business partners who still felt guilty for believing his lies. But I couldn't move. I stood there until the sun sank behind the trees. The world felt still again. That same stillness I remembered from Portugal. Only this time, I wasn't lost. That evening, I returned home to the house I'd rebuilt piece by piece. On the workbench in the back room lay a small wooden box, one I had been carving for months. Smooth oak, varnished by hand, with a single inscription on the lid. "To my son, Ethan." Inside it, I placed 3 things. The photograph of our family, now faded at the edges. The letter he sent from Portugal, and a single lily from Margaret's grave, pressed between 2 sheets of paper. I didn't know if anyone would ever open it. Maybe someday Noah would. Maybe he'd find it tucked away in the attic after I was gone and wonder what it all meant. Maybe he'd understand that it wasn't a box of grief, it was a message. That love survives even the worst kind of betrayal. Life moved on, quietly but steadily. Lena and Noah began visiting me every Sunday. Sometimes we'd cook together, other times we'd just sit on the porch and talk about nothing. The weather, the school fair, the birds returning to the lake. It wasn't grand or dramatic, but it was life. One evening, Noah came into the shop while I was repairing an old radio. "Grandpa," he said softly, "Mom told me what happened with Dad." I stopped working, the screwdriver trembling slightly in my hand. Oh. He nodded. She said he made mistakes, but that he tried to fix them. I looked at him. Those same blue eyes, the same unsure curiosity that Ethan once had. That's true, I said. He tried. And sometimes, trying is what saves a man. He thought for a moment, then asked, "Do you miss him?" The question hit harder than I expected. I smiled faintly. Every day, even after everything, especially after everything, I said quietly, because he was my son, and that never changes. Noah nodded, seeming to understand more than his age should have allowed. Then he pulled a small envelope from his pocket. "Mom found this in one of Dad's things," he said, handing it to me. I opened it slowly. Inside was a postcard, a photograph of that same beach in Portugal, golden light spilling across the shore. On the back, written in Ethan's shaky handwriting, were 4 simple words. I made it home. My eyes blurred, and for a long time, I couldn't speak. I set the postcard down carefully, then looked at Noah. "Your father's home now," I said softly. "In every way that matters." That night, I walked to the lake one last time. The air was cool, the water calm and mirror-like. I could see the reflection of the stars scattered across its surface. I sat on the old bench, the one where I used to talk to Margaret when life felt too heavy. "I did what you'd have wanted," I whispered. "I forgave him." A gentle wind stirred the reeds, carrying the scent of spring rain. I closed my eyes, imagining her beside me, the soft sound of her laugh, the warmth of her hand. For the first time in years, the ache inside my chest didn't feel like loss. It felt like peace. I took one last look at the postcard, folded it neatly, and tucked it into my coat pocket. Then I stood, breathing in the night air, clean, light, and full of new beginnings. Because the truth was simple. Ethan was gone, but his memory didn't hurt anymore. It had softened, like waves smoothing the edges of a jagged rock. And as I walked home under the stars, I realized the real revenge hadn't been the article, or the ruin of his business, or even the truth that exposed him. The real revenge was that I had found peace, while he was still searching for it. And in the end, peace was louder than pain ever could be.